Hello everybody, my name is Virtual Rook and today we're going to learn how to make a real working bow and arrow in Unreal Engine 5.4. Anyway, let's get right into the tutorial. Okay, before we do anything else, we're going to go over to our VR template blueprints. We're going to go to our grab type, and where it says custom, we're going to set this to relative position. Okay, we're going to save that, close it. We're going to go under our grab component. And then under grab component, we're going to go ahead and click on grabbed, and we are going to add a new parameter that we're just going to call motion controller. Okay, and it's going to be a motion controller component, object reference. There we go, compile and save. And then under try grab, we're just going to come down here to the bottom where it says store a reference to the motion controller to initiate the grab. And we're just going to drag this off and attach it to motion controller down here on call on grabbed. We'll just compile and save. Then we're going to go back up to our content, right click, add a new folder called blueprints. Change the color to blue. You don't have to do this, but I like doing it. All right, double click on that. Once we're inside, okay, we'll right click, import game asset. We'll click on rigged bow 06, open, import all. Don't worry about the warnings. Okay, now we have our skeletal mesh, physics asset, and skeleton, as well as the materials, which is obviously nice. We're also going to right click, do another import, and click on arrow. Import all. Again, we're just gonna ignore the warnings. It's just mad about smoothing groups, which whatever. We'll double click on physics asset, because we have to fix this. So we're just going to delete all of these. And then we're going to come up here, we're going to show all bones. All right, we'll click on rigged bow, and we'll come up to the plus and add a box. We'll scale that down until it's about the size, and we'll scale it on the X just to take up as much space as it can. And then just so we're a little bit more accurate on the shape, we're just gonna add another box, get it the same size, bring it to the center of the top of the bow right here, right, until it's like intersecting, so a little bit more. Okay, and then we'll just rotate that by, yeah, probably about 30. And we'll scale that. And we made it a little bit too long, so we'll move that back. And then one more time, we'll go back up to rigged bow, and we will add a box, and we'll do the bottom. I'm sure there's probably a way to just copy and like move the top one to do this, but this is how I feel has worked for me. There we go. Okay, not perfect, but serviceable. Excellent. Okay, we can save that, close it. Next up, we'll go into the skeleton. And we will come up to create asset, create animation, current pose. And we're going to rename this to Slack, rigged bow 06 Slack, okay. And then it'll pop this up, but we're not worried about this right now, so we can close it. Then we're going to grab string bottom. We have to set it to world rotation. And we're gonna move this by, let's say, 30, sure. And we'll go down to string top, and we'll do 30 as well. Let's do 40 on both. So one more tick, sure. Not my best rigging job, but it's fine. For this tutorial, it's okay. We will then go back up to create asset, create animation, current pose, and we will change this to drawn. Okay, now we have a drawn pose. Close that. We can also close this now. We'll go to rigged bow 06 skeleton, right click, create, and we'll make a blend space 1D. So we'll call that blend 1D bow. Okay, double click on that. Now down here we should have draw and slack, but before we start on that, let's go over on the left here and under axis settings, drop down the horizontal axis, and we're gonna set the minimum to 0 and the maximum to 1. Okay, so now this is just a value between 0 and 1. We're then going to grab slack, and we're gonna put it at the beginning, and then we'll grab drawn and we'll put it at the end. And it should be in the right spot for both of them. Yes, they're both in the right spot. If they're not in the right spot, just come over here to blend samples, do the drop down on each of your animations, and make sure that none is set to 0 and none on slack, or sorry, none on the second animation is set to 1. I also just realized that I put in the wrong one, so this should be this, drawn. There we go. And you can hold down Control and scrub through just to make sure that it's actually playing between those two animations. But besides that, we're done. So we'll save, close, right click on the skeletal mesh, create, and then make an animation blueprint. We're going to call that ABP for animation blueprint bow. Okay, double click on that. Cool. Let's bring in our blend 1D bow. All right, attach that to there. And then let's go ahead and right click on this and promote to a variable. And we're going to name that variable. We're going to set the variable to current slider progress. Okay, now, right now we don't have some of the components that we need to finish this. So we're going to put this on hold. We're going to compile and save. Okay, and I'm going to just put this up here so that way we can see it. And now we're going to right click inside of our blueprints folder and go to blueprint class, actor. We're going to call this BP bow. Open that up. In here, we're going to get a skeletal mesh right here. And we're going to call this SM for skeletal mesh bow. We're going to make that the default scene root. And we're also going to make sure that none of this is changed, like none of the scale is changed or anything like that. We're going to click on the SM bow, and under its mesh, we're going to add our rigged bow. There it is, very pretty. And then while we're in here, we're going to set our collision for it. So we're going to scroll down until we hit collision, and we're going to tell it that we want this to be a physics actor. We're also going to come over to the physics tab and make sure that we check simulate physics. Compile and save. Make sure that none of the scaling has changed. I'm going to harp about that a lot in this tutorial. So then we're going to add a grab component. Cool. We're going to call it grab bow. Okay. And that's just, attached to SM bow. We're going to set it to snap turn. And then we're going to set its rotation to 90. This will make it so whenever we grab the bow, our hand actually holds it where it's supposed to hold it and in the general direction that we want it to be held. We're then going to add a spline. So we'll add spline. We'll click over here to get to its first point, and we are going to move it back on the Y until it's lined up with our string. Okay. And then we're going to go to our last point and make sure that the X is 0, so that way it's straight, and the Y is 600, so we have a good amount of movement between the pole. We're then going to add an arrow. We're going to move it in front of the bow, and we're going to make sure that it's pointing forward. So you will rotate it 90 degrees on the Z. We can even see over here, negative 90 degrees on the Z axis. And we're going to call that arrow spawn point. We're then going to add a box collider. We'll call this collider string. And then we will move that back to where the string is. So about 170. And then again, do not touch the scale in the transform. We're going to go down to shape, and under box extent, we're going to try give this a little bit of extra space, but also make it thinner so that way we're not accidentally grabbing it. That's probably good right there. And then under that collider string, we're going to add a grab component. We're going to call this grab string. We want that to be relative position, which is what we set up at the beginning of the tutorial. Okay, make sure the grab string is over top of the collider string. So just move its location back until it's at the 170 mark. We're then going to go back to our collider string, go down to its collision settings, and make sure that it has no collision. All right, we're then going to make sure that we're back on the root, so not underneath the collider string, just in the root. And we're going to add a static mesh, and we're going to call this arrow. We'll then scroll back up, and under static mesh, we will find our arrow static mesh, and we're going to move this into position of where the string is. Actually, now I think about it, we are going to attach this to the collider string, okay? Because we want this to move back with the string. We also want to make sure that we come back up to collision presets. And we want to make sure that we make this no collision because there's nothing that it should be blocked by. But for right now, we're going to set its visibility to off. Do visible, off. So it's there, but it's not there. Okay, and the last thing that we're going to do in here for now is we're going to go to variable. We're going to hit plus, and we're going to add a variable called pullback. And we're going to set that to be a float. For now, we're going to compile and save. And we're going to go over to our VR template, blueprints. We're going to find their projectile, and we're going to duplicate it. We're going to call this projectile underscore arrow. And we're going to drag it over into our blueprints. Move here. Okay. So now we have projectile arrow. We'll open that up. We'll go into its viewport, and we're just going to replace the static mesh with the arrow. And make sure that we also get the material for the arrow. But yeah, it's material 002 maybe? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Perfect. Okay. And then we're just going to move that static mesh back until it's near the sphere collision. I like to keep the arrow head a little bit forward, so that way whenever it collides with something, it looks like it's stuck to it. Okay, so this is moving in the x-axis. So we just need to rotate our arrow to also be facing the correct way. And again, we'll move it a little bit in, compile and save. We're then going to go into the projectile movement settings, and we're going to change a couple of things. First off, we're going to do rotation follows velocity. So click that. We're going to make sure that simulation is enabled. It is. And then make sure that should bounce is off, which again, it is. All right, we're not going to change too much about the event graph in this one, but what we want to do is select this and delete it. And then down here where it's destroy projectile on stop, we still want it to do that, but instead we want a slight delay. So we'll add a delay node, and we'll just set that to like 5 seconds. It doesn't just immediately disappear whenever it hits something. And then up here, we're going to get a begin play event. And we're also going to make a custom event that we're going to call arrow speed. And with that custom event selected, we're going to come over to inputs. We're going to add a new input. And we're going to call that speed. And it's going to be a float. All right, and then from event begin play, we're just going to activate that event. So arrow speed, compile and save. And the things that we want to do with arrow speed is get a reference to our projectile movement, drag out from there, and set max speed. We also want to set initial speed. And then last but not least, we want to set velocity in local space. We want to split the strut pins on this. And then we're pretty good. So we're going to go from arrow speed, connect that, then we'll connect it to here, and then we'll connect that to here. And then from speed, we're just going to multiply by like, I don't know, whatever speed you want. Let's do like 2000, because we're going to be getting a number from 0 to 1. It's going to be a pretty small number that we're multiplying by. And then we're just going to plug that in to each one of these. And we're going to plug it into the X of the set velocity in local space. And we're just going to leave the Y and Z at 0. All right, that should do it for our arrow projectile. So we can compile and save that, and we can actually close that one. All right, so then we're going to go back to our BP bow, and we can finally go to our event graph. I don't think we're going to be using any of these, so I'm going to delete them. And then we're going to right click on our grab string, and we're going to add event on grab. And while we're here, we're also going to add event on dropped. But first, let's focus on the on grab. From here, we'll go ahead and promote this to a variable. So we're just going to set the motion controller that's grabbing it. We're then going to grab our arrow static mesh, and we are going to set visibility to true, because we want it to appear whenever we grab the string. I'm going to drag out again, and we're going to set timer by function name. And the function name is going to be relative position. Awesome. And then return value, we're just going to right click and promote that to a variable that we are going to call timer. While we're here, let's set our timer to 0.02. We could add 0.01. If you have a system that can't handle it being at 0.01, like if you're noticing lag, you can set this 0.02 or even I think 0.03, and it'll take some of the load off of your system. And we also want to make sure that that's looping. All right, that should be everything for the on grabbed. So let's go down to our on dropped. Now this one's going to be a little bit more complicated. So we're going to go ahead, drag out and do a sequence. And we're just going to add an extra pin now because we're going to need it. First thing we're going to do is get our timer variable. So get timer, pull down from that, and we are going to clear and invalidate timer by handle. So that's the first thing we do. I'm going to make it a little hat. We are then going to grab our motion controller reference, and we are going to set motion controller, and we're just going to leave it empty. So that way it knows that there's no motion controller in there anymore. We will then drag out from that and set relative location. And we want to do that for collider string. Now this one's kind of a little important. We're going to split the strut pins on this. All right. And we're going to click on our collider string. And we can see here that on the Y, it's at 170 whenever it's stopped. So we're going to go down to Y and we're going to type in 170. And we're just going to hit teleport, so that way, whenever we let go, it just teleports right back to that position. Then drag out arrow, and we're going to set visibility, and we'll make it false. So once we fire the arrow, there is no longer an arrow on the string because we fired it. And then we'll go over to our sequence, drag out on 1, and we will spawn actor class. Yeah, spawn actor from class. And that class is going to be our arrow, projectile. So projectile arrow, its owner is going to be self, and the instigator is going to be the player pawn. So we'll just get player pawn. And we're going to need a little bit more space for what we have to do here, so we're going to drag this down. We're then going to go over to our arrow spawn point. We're going to drag that out. And using that, we're going to get its world location. We're also going to get its world rotation. We're then going to make transform. Cool. Plug that into the return value for rotation, which gives us this value. And then we're just going to plug that straight into the spawn transform. Awesome. Now that we have a reference to our projectile, we just want to drag out from here and get the arrow speed. And then the speed is going to be determined by that float that we made earlier. So we'll get that and we'll plug that into speed. Now, we haven't set what pullback actually is or how we're going to get numbers from it yet. So that's where our relative position comes in. So we're going to double click on this function name to get the relative position. We're going to copy it, and then we are going to add a new function. And that function is, we're just going to paste in that name so it knows exactly which one we're referencing. I know this is a lot to take in. Hopefully you're still following along. Oh, you know what? One last thing that we are going to do. We're going to go back to our event graph. We're going to drag out from 2 on that sequence, set pullback to 0. So just let it go back to being 0. Now we can go into the relative position function and we can start working on this. If you watch my tutorial on how to set up a slider, then you already are going to know this code because it's the exact same code for the slider. It's just now we're applying it to the pullback of the bow. That being said, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to grab a reference to our motion controller, so get motion controller. We're also going to grab a reference to our collider string. We're going to get the world transform of both. Get world transform. Okay, I can just copy and paste that and then plug this in. We are then going to make relative transform. Now this is really important. Make sure motion controller is A and collider string is going into the relative 2. It will break otherwise. From here, we're going to split our strut pins, and then we're going to split our location strut pin. So now we have all of our locations, and we're going to drag out from the Y and hit plus. So we're adding. From there, we'll grab another reference to our string, collider, and we will get its relative location, get relative location, split its strut pins, and then drag its Y into the plus. So we're adding it, and then we'll drag out from the plus to add it to a clamp float. So right up here at the top, clamp float. And now we have to figure out the min and max. So to do that, we're going to drag out our spline, and we are going to get location at spline point. All right, we're gonna control copy and paste that, reattach it, and we're going to make sure that this has the index of 1. And then we have to yet again split the strut pins on both of these, and we're going to plug in the Y of both, but we want to make sure that the 0 location spline point is the min, and then the point index 1 is the max, because it's the beginning and the end of the spline. We're going to grab our collider string, and we are going to set its relative location, split the strut pins on it, and we're going to plug the return value into the Y. And we want to make sure that teleport is true. And then we're just going to come back over here, grab our relative position, and hook that up to the set relative location. We're then going to grab pullback, but we're going to set it. So we're going to set pullback, plug that in. Now to get our pullback amount, we're going to pull down from return value on the clamp float and type in normalized to range. And then the range value is going to be the Y on both of our spline points. And what normalized to range basically does is it takes whatever our clamp float value is, and then judging based on the numbers that are in the min and max, it makes it a number between 0 and 1, which, as you remember, was what we were using in the projectile to figure out how fast it should be moving. So then we could take the return value, we can plug that into pullback. We can hit compile and save. One more thing, so the animations actually work properly for the string. Go up to the skeletal mesh for SM bow, and then there should be an animation class. Yeah, okay, animation class, and we want to do ABP bow. Okay, so that way it's referencing that animation blueprint that we made. So now we can compile and save, and now the bow should be done. Then we can go into the ABP bow, and we can finally set this up so that way the animations actually work. So let's go over to the event graph, drag out from here, and we're going to get actor of class. Okay, and we're going to set that to be our BP bow. So let's just do BP bow. There we go. And then from return value, we'll get the pullback. So get pullback, and then we're just going to go to current slider progress, and we're going to set current slider progress, and it's going to be based off of pullback. And remember, pullback, we normalize so it's between 0 and 1, and we also set our blend space to be between 0 and 1, so that should work fine. We're going to compile and save, and now all we have to do is make some room, so get out of here, guns. And then we're just going to grab our BP bow. We're going to put it in the scene. It's huge right now. That's just to make sure that the physics work properly, but whenever it's in, just scale it down to a normal bow size. Okay, well, we might have to turn that off. That's probably about the size of a normal bow. And I'll put it close to the edge so that way it's easy to grab. Before we go into VR, let's just save everything. Okay, teleport over, pick up our bow, and fire. Then there you have it. We have a working bow now. And it should still be able to interact with physics objects. It should stick into walls. And it works hopefully exactly the way that you want it to. And you can put it down, and yeah, we're done. All right, well, there you have it, everyone. I hope the tutorial worked for you. If you have any questions or if something's broken, just message me down below. You know I'm always happy to help. Make sure that you subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We're almost at 1,000 subs. We only have 90 some subs left before 1,000, which is crazy to me. It really means the world. Thank you so much to my coffee members, Vegasar, as well as Starry-Eyed Prince. Your support is really helpful to me. And if you would also like to be a Ko-Fi supporter, go here. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for today, everybody. Thank you so much again for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye for now.